There's nothing worse than being afraid in your own home. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, there are hundreds of documented cases of seemingly possessed homes. These 10 subscribers sent in their allegedly true experiences while living in what they believe to be haunted houses. I myself believe I may have lived in a haunted house as a kid. It was built in 1803, and we even found the original people who built the house buried out back behind the barn. We all had some creepy experiences there after that. If you have a story you'd like to share in a future video, whether it be a haunted house story or something completely different, be sure to send it in at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and sit back, relax, and prepare for some spooky stories. One last thing before we get into these stories, my good friend Nightmare Files helped me read story number 2, so if you enjoy his voice, be sure to check him out and subscribe. You can find the link to his channel in the description down below. He does some pretty cool videos, and I know you'll enjoy them. Now let's get into these tales of terror. I was listening to your videos and thought I'd send you some small but chilling encounters from my aunt, who most mediums say is a hypersensitive to spirits. From before I was born, she was seeing ghosts and scary figures. One encounter she told me was one night she awoke from a deep sleep to see a nun standing over her, just looking at her. For some reason, my aunt would never get scared of the ghost or paranormal. I imagine it was because she was so used to seeing them. So after she moved into her new home, with her family, close to us, she started to experience it, all which for the most part has died down as it has gone on. So most of the small stuff she would see or hear is the likes of chairs moving from downstairs. She has long wooden ones, to shadows moving across doorways. But the scarier stories go like this. My aunt was sleeping one night with my 2 younger cousins. She said she was in a daze and she was starting to hear a whisper calling her name faintly. She was in the later stages of falling asleep, but the voice started to get louder and started getting closer and closer together until the next thing she knew, someone full-on shouted at her. She awoke to nothing. Looking about, she noticed a small figure at the end of the bed. It was the size of my young cousin, and she asked him what he was doing and said to get back to bed, only to have the figure disappear in front of her. The next, she was downstairs cleaning by herself, everyone being out, but she was cleaning and she started to hear noises from her living room. She heard the house noises, but she continued to clean. She walked into her living room, looking behind the TV, only to see a man standing there looking at her. She took a second glance and he was gone. The last story is my own experience in her house. It was late at night, and we were in her room watching a movie as everyone was staying at a friend's before heading to bed. I got up to go to the toilet and down the stairs. My aunt had wooden floors. I heard what sounded like heels walking up the hall and towards the stairs, only for the first stair to make a noise as someone was slowly coming up the stairs. Let's just say I ran back into the room and waited for her to go for a smoke. The next morning, all my aunt's DVDs and cousins' games had been moved from the drawers and stacked out in small piles on the floor. This would be a loud and long process due to the number of DVDs and games at the time, and I never heard a thing.
Hello, my name is Clay. I am a 41-year-old truck driver and married with 3 stepchildren. All my life, even from infancy, I have had experiences with the spirits, ghosts, and demons. I'll start with what happened from before I was born and still in my mother's belly. This is what she experienced while pregnant with me. She lived in a single wide trailer in eastern Kentucky, and the trailer was very haunted. One night, she was in front of a mirror in her bedroom, getting ready for work, and a black shadowy hand came over her head and touched her belly. Keep in mind, she was pregnant with me at this time. While that happened, she got a strong thought in her head that said the boy is marked. After I was born, I was a very sensitive child to paranormal. I would see and hear unexplained things. When I was 5, my aunt and immediate family all moved into a new house my grandmother built for us. It was a small 3-bedroom brick home, ranch style, but nothing fancy. We lived there for 15 years. It was the house I grew up in, but the first 8 years were a nightmarish hell. It was all wood paneling walls, and in the walls of the paneling, you could see distorted faces just looking at you. My sister and I would play and run up and down the hallways of the house. While doing so, we would see heads peeking around the corners of the doorways of the bedrooms. There were times the air would be so heavy, you could not stay in the house. It was a heavy feeling of being watched and unwanted. Stuffed toys would be moved about like they were alive. I actually had a stuffed dog that one night his eyes started blinking at me. If you put any stuffed toy in the room with you, eventually it would be staring at you. One time my sister left her bedroom and went to get something out of the refrigerator, and when she returned to her room, it was trashed. Even the mattress of her bed was on the floor. I got the blame even though everyone knew it couldn't have been me because I was in the kitchen with her at the time. Another time, we all woke up to what sounded like running on the ceiling of my house. My dad and I followed it from one end to the other of the house. Finally, my grandma comes to visit, and my mother is telling her about all the things that are going on. My grandma said we needed to burn everything. Furniture, toys, everything a spirit could attach itself to. So we did. That seemed to take care of the problem for the most part. We still had minor things happen once in a while, but very far and few between. The face peeking around the doors was gone. The distorted faces in the paneling disappeared. No more noises or ominous feelings. The very last thing that happened to me in that house was a few years later, and it was minor. I got up. It was getting ready to leave for school. I turned all the lights out, and before I walked out the door, the living room light came back on. But it never happened again after that. I have other stories and experiences. Perhaps I will share them someday.
When my husband and I first married, we lived towns apart due to work. We also had a toddler. We decided to move in together as quickly as possible and went house hunting. I have always enjoyed stories of supernatural and paranormal occurrences, and joked about how much I would love a haunted house. I was later told by a clairvoyant that the universe delivers. We finally settled on a house that was in our price range. It was built in the 80s, so no concern of lead paint nor historic value. Everything went smoothly for the most part. Our toddler would awaken in the middle of the night and explain that her stuffed animals would move or fly. We figured she just wanted to sleep with us. Moving was a big transition for such a youngster. We got pregnant with another kiddo quickly, and he went out of country for about a year for work. Things were normal for the most part. The baby, 6 to 12-month age range, would sometimes stare at the front door and cry or point behind me when I was doing dishes. Nothing too weird. My husband returned and I eventually decided to remodel the house. It had not been updated since being built. It was a major undertaking. My youngest was probably 2 years old at this point, and the oldest was 6. I became convinced that our house was haunted at this point, and continued to be convinced for about 2 years. It is hard to remember the time frames for everything, but I will describe the activities that occurred during this 2 to 3 year period as best as I can for you. I had a dog who required medication twice daily. It would frequently go missing. I would find it later in the same spot I always kept it. One of my daughters would talk about the little boy that lived in the closet and that she was afraid of him. So we moved the two girls into the same room because they felt a lot better, and maybe they were just lonely or something was my thought. This gave my husband a room to dedicate to his man cave and online PC gaming. My husband would talk about seeing a shadow dart back and forth in the hallway. I had a dream that when we took down the sheetrock, we found a secret room with dead twins who warned us to get out. All of this stuff seemed like normal occurrences that happen in life. But then, I finally became convinced that the house was haunted. My children and husband were all in bed. I had clean laundry waiting to be folded on the chase, but decided to sprawl out on the couch and watch The Breakfast Club instead. Alone time was rare. All of a sudden, a shirt flew from the chase and hit me in the face. I ran to the bedroom and my husband was asleep. I woke him up and he voiced that he didn't believe me, but I knew better because he got anxious and couldn't sleep. The next big event occurred when my youngest told me there was a man in her bedroom. We had a security alarm, so I know this just couldn't be true. I had her take me to the bedroom and show me. She described him as black and pointed, then stated, "He's right there, he's behind you." I told her we would just leave him alone and go about our day. We had other things happen that we just explained away. I woke up to a shadowy figure hovering above my husband. My dogs would wake up in the middle of the night and bark at the foot of the bed. I would hear noises coming from the kids' room and get a terrible feeling when I would check on them. I sometimes had to walk through a cold mist to get into their bedroom. My dogs also would sometimes bark in the hallway. I finally called someone to intervene when my husband met me at my door, freaking out. I worked weekends and would sometimes come home and tell him about my day while he played on his computer. The kids would be in bed by this time. I would then go shower and go to sleep. This night, my husband said I'd already been home and talked to him about my day. I then said I was going to shower, so when he heard the garage door open and the car pull in, he immediately panicked. I was frightened to hear this as well. An entity taking my identity made me feel helpless. A co-worker got me in contact with their friend with special abilities. Her friend came over with another medium. They smudged our home and put quartz crystals in the corner. It was all free. They told me that the limestone behind us had energy in it which attracts transient spirits and entities. Some are good and some are not. The Shadow Man stayed because of my husband's PTSD and was attracted to the negativity. They also said domestic abuse had previously occurred in the man cave at some point, and that was a big focus of negative energy. They taught me to smudge and told me I have ancestors by my side keeping me safe. Things would still happen on occasion after this. We spoke to our Muslim friends about it and they thought it sounded like a jinn. These creatures are mischievous and can be good or bad. They gave us a religious artifact from their hometown that had a prayer in Arabic carved into it. We kept it on our mantle and never had trouble after that. They would always laugh at Christmas time when we had our Christmas mantle decorations and our Muslim artifact. We have since moved, but did spend a decade in that home. This all happened a few years ago in a little hick town. My friends and I were bored as hell, so we decided to find some trouble to get into. My friend mentioned a super creepy house in the middle of nowhere that had been sitting empty for a little over a year. We decided since we didn't have anything better to do, we should go check it out. So, the 6 of us crammed into a car and headed over there. It was around 3 a.m., middle of summer. The moon was full and it lit up everything around us. We parked a little way up the road and walked up to the house. It was definitely spooky in the moonlight. It kind of looked like the creepy house from the Blair Witch Project. We were originally just going to walk around the property, but my boyfriend at the time decided to kick the door open and explore inside as well. 3 of my friends stayed outside to watch for cops. The cops didn't normally patrol the area, but we wanted to be extra safe. The other 2 and I went inside. I made it 6 feet into the house probably before I got hit with a really weird, heavy feeling. It felt like I was being wrapped in a thick blanket, but instead of being warm and cozy, it was oddly cold. I noped the F out of there as fast as I could. My boyfriend and our friend, let's call him Tim, teased me, saying that I was just being a pussy. I knew something was weird in that house, and I just refused to go back in. Tim decided to record their walkthrough of the house. After walking through the house, Tim picked something up, threw it at my boyfriend, and started screaming to spook him. Well, it worked, and they ran out. The three of us then started looking through a shed in the back. We found various hunting traps. They looked pretty old and rusted, so I assumed they were just hung up for decoration. My boyfriend decided to take one to remember that night. I'm pretty sure the trap that he stole that night might have had something attached to it. A lot of weird stuff started happening at our place after that, but those are stories for another time. We left shortly after. When we got back home, we watched the video took inside the house. After we laughed at my boyfriend's screams, Tim said he thought he heard something weird in the video. So we played it back, and sure enough, while they're running out of the house, there's a voice in the video. It was a woman's voice clearly saying, "She died here." We collectively lost our crap. I was the only girl there that night, and the sound of them screaming and running would have drowned out my talking. I wish I still had the video for proof, but I had a falling out with Tim and deleted our messages, so I don't have the video anymore, unfortunately. I still beat myself up over for not saving it. I used to be terrified of the paranormal, so I didn't save it when I first got it. I've come to accept that I'll always have some weird paranormal experiences, and it'll always be part of my life. That video was the first paranormal experience I've had solid evidence of. My husband and I moved into his grandfather's old house a couple of years ago. I've had paranormal experiences in the past, so I don't usually get too frightened when things go bump in the night. My husband and I haven't really noticed any issues since we've moved in. The only thing I can really say is a lot of times I felt like I was being watched when I was walking through the house. I work days and my husband works nights, so we are home alone more than together. Recently, I've noticed activity has picked up more than usual. I have noticed shadows walking in my bedroom, down in my doorways and in my hallways and stuff like that, and I'll always notice weird movement out of the corner of my eye as well. My dogs sometimes will growl and bark towards the hallway while I'm in bed. We live in a wooded area, so wild animals do come around the house. Generally, my dogs will go bark at the doors. We live in a wooded area, so while wild animals do come around the house, generally, my dogs will go to the doors and bark, not at my hallway, leading me to believe they sense something. A backstory to the house. My husband's grandfather didn't pass while living in the house, however. He was very, very sick there. I also didn't know until recently that his brother, his great uncle, shot himself in our driveway outside the house. My theory, my husband and I have been through some trying times recently. Nothing too big, but I do get depressed sometimes. My husband's grandmother is also very sick and very close to death. She doesn't live within our home, but I have a weird feeling maybe that has something to do with it. My point of this, I guess I'm just getting it out there and asking for opinions of what others may think, and why it has suddenly gotten worse. I don't feel scared, but I also don't really trust it. Nobody has attempted communication, well, we refuse to anyway, and we pretty much just treat it like it doesn't exist. I've dealt with worse in the past, so I'm not too worried yet. So my house is haunted. We've had paranormal investigators inside my house, and they have even told us that there are other people in our house. Our first experience was when my sister was walking our dog, and both her and the puppy saw my father crouching beside our house. He said that he was inside the whole time. The next experiences are mine. I was up late watching TV, and then I had to throw something away. I turned around and I saw a man that was balding. He had long pointy nose and a mouth that looked like he was trying to kiss someone. I immediately ran upstairs, not turning the lights or TV off. Another time, when I was sleeping on my sister's floor, for those who are wondering, a stink bug fell on my face when I was trying to fall asleep and it scared me forever, and her closet door started to creak open slowly. I felt my heart drop in my stomach as the thought of someone in my sister's closet watching her when she was in her room. I was holding the door shut with both of my feet but was feeling no resistance. I decided to take my feet off the door and nothing was happening. I stayed up all night and was just waiting for a person to just step out. The final story was my cousin's. He was house sitting while we went to Maine for the weekend. He was alone in the house and heard people talking. He immediately left and hightailed it out of there and couldn't explain where they was coming from. He said all the TVs and all the radios and everything were off. Super strange. I was sleeping over with my friend. We were telling ghost stories. Little did we know that something was going to happen. It was 4 p.m. when we got to her house after school. Her sister wasn't home. We went upstairs and were telling ghost stories under her blankets with a flashlight. We heard footsteps right outside her bed, like someone was pacing around the bed. I looked out of the blankets and no one was there. Later that night we were going to bed, and we heard knocking on her bedroom door. She unlocked the door and opened it, and no one was there. I went outside and wandered around the house, and no one was home at all. I went back upstairs and was sitting in a chair. Looking at me was a man. He was wearing a blue suit and had a pale face and hands. He didn't have any eyes, nor did he have a nose. Instead, there was black emptiness. I was scared to death. I went pale and felt this sense of dread and hatred, like I wasn't supposed to be there or I wasn't welcome. I looked away to tell my friend, and when she and I looked back, he was gone. Since then, I haven't gone back to that house. It was truly scary. I thank you for reading my story. This happened back when I was 10, so around 2013. I am now 15, and I am okay now. I am not the only one who has experienced something in that house. My friend told me that her other friend came over and had felt unwelcome as well. Another time was when she was watching TV, and the magazines on the table went flying across the room. To this day, she still has experiences in the house. I've only told this to a handful of people. I know it sounds crazy, and the only other person who can confirm any of this is my little brother, who has since passed away. When I was very young, I rented my first house, a 3-bedroom, 1-bath ranch-style house with a full basement. I rented it from my aunt who recently married into the family. She had recently inherited the house from her grandfather. The house had been in their family since its original construction, when it was a 1-room, no plumbing or electricity house. As time went on, the house was expanded and updated. Her grandfather and his dad actually ran the original electricity in the house. My uncle and aunt bought a new house and were starting a family, but they wanted to keep the ranch house, so this was a perfect arrangement. I moved into the house on my own. However, a few other people had a key to get in. My brother, a friend, and an aunt and uncle had a key. The only time I locked the door was when I left or was sleeping. My friend's family just walked in when I was home. My brother would sleep over a few nights a week, and he would spend time in my home even if I wasn't there. Shortly after moving in, weird stuff started happening. Things would go missing or be found where they have no right or reason to be. I'd hear steps in the hallway, then a bedroom door slam close. When I would investigate, no one would be there, and no one else would even be in the house. This would happen a few times a week. Sometimes if I ignored it, the door would open and slam shut 3 times in a row. This would happen with no windows open and no AC or heat current, but still, I convinced myself it was bad hinges, settling, or my imagination. Shortly after that, I started hearing voices, loud enough to hear but too hushed to make out what was being said, so I'd turn on the TV or play music over it. I almost always had music on anyways. I would tell myself I was being paranoid. Next came lights flashing on and off. This was always coming from another room. I'd see it happening in the kitchen if I was in the living room, or I'd see it down the hall coming from the restroom if I was at the kitchen counter cooking. I would tell myself it was due to the old DIY wiring being flaky. It would happen quick and fast. The light would go on, off, on, off, on, off, just enough to really get my attention to them. It wasn't long after that I would see things fly by my peripheral vision. This was random and quite scary. Up to now, these things only happened when I was home alone, but this happened a few times when people were over visiting. However, no one else really noticed but me. People would see me react, but that was all. Awkward. About this time, the light on-off game would end with the light being on. I would have to manually flip the switch off, and this really freaked me out as I could no longer blame it on bad wiring, as bad wiring wouldn't flip the switch up and down. I came full circle and just stopped explaining it all away and accepted that my house was haunted. When I told people I had ghosts, they would laugh and then nothing would happen while they were over, so I guess I get why I looked crazy. When I would investigate the doors or turn a light off after the light game, things would calm down. But after some time, I stopped investigating. Why bother? This would cause things to get worse. Then, many lights would go on and off, many doors would slam. Keys I just put down in their spot would disappear. I would literally freak out and have to block doors open with chairs. I would yell things like, "Okay, I get it, you're pissed. You have my full attention now." With that, things would calm. From here on out, little things didn't happen in little spurts. When things happened, it was 2 or 3 things at once, and things would accelerate quickly. So I would yell something like, "I know you're here, knock it off." Just as I'd yell, someone would walk through the door, and I would look crazy. My family started taking it personally. I'm sure I looked crazy. Lots of me looking crazy. This happened enough times that when multiple things would happen, I'd say something smart like, "Thanks for the heads up. I wonder who's coming over." Or I'd yell, "Come on in, I'm in the kitchen." Next, this only happened a few times as I moved sooner. After, I'll tell you the first time something happened with my brother present. I had been out pretty much late in the night. I came home and shortly after my brother came over, after he got off work. He was on second shift. We were in my kitchen, music on, eating and talking. Out of nowhere, something flew across the kitchen. We both reacted. Then it flew back, nearly giving us whiplash. We looked at each other like, what the hell? We went to the far corner of the long kitchen, where we thought whatever it was going to be there, but there was nothing there. It flew by again, one last time. Over the shoulder, close enough to feel a breeze. I was actually happy someone else saw what I had been seeing. We were both freaked out. To this day, I think things happened to him when he was in the house alone. I think he wrote it off and explained it away. He was in the house far less than me though, but really, he was the only person to spend hours and days in the house. Some other things that happened. Every time it rained, hundreds of little frogs would fill the basement. I don't know where they went or where they even came from. Once a huge black snake was in my bed. It crawled up between my legs within a few minutes of me being in bed. I screamed and jumped out of bed. My brother ran in, turned on the light, and pulled the blanket, and we saw this huge black snake. He threw it out of the house. I often felt like I was being watched or lightly touched on the shoulder or neck from behind. I only lived in that house for a little under 6 months. My uncle swore me to secrecy. He was afraid of what my aunt would say if I told her about it, that it would upset her or something. She loved the house. Her grandparents raised her and she had actually grown up in the house. She had never had any bad experiences in the house. Any thoughts or ideas on what could have been in this house? Any ideas to why it seemed to want me to be scared and to look crazy? This story has about 3 parts, and they all related to each other over time that leads me to think that my house is haunted. So for a backstory, I live on the coast in the middle of about 13 acres of woods we own, and about 27 more acres surround us all around our property, as well with a few people who live close by. Ever since I was a kid, I liked spells and magic, so I would play with that type of thing. Nothing happened, I think, but these stories make me question that. So this first part is from when I was about 5 or so, and I still remember it so well that it scares me. One night, I had gotten in trouble with my parents for sassing off to them, and they sent me to my room. It was dark out when I was tossing a clear, sparkly plastic Cinderella shoe around the room. I accidentally tossed it into the floor, and it toppled to the floor of my closet. I got out of my bed and picked up the shoe, but when I stood back up, my eyes locked with a young woman with shoulder-length fawn-colored hair and green eyes. As for what she wore, I forgot, but I do know it was shorts and a top with a jacket tossed carelessly across her shoulders, and she was pale, as well as had burn marks on her left arm and right leg. She looked at me and I looked at her. Then, she walked into one wall toward the hallway and turned back around and walked back into my closet, soon after walking back through the other side of the wall. After that, I saw her every night for many weeks and I called her my ghost friend or Meg as I got older. After about 2 years of telling people about her, no one would listen, and people began telling me I was insane, so I stopped talking about it, and kind of forgot about her and my stories. Well, I guess I didn't forget exactly, I just stopped thinking about it. For the second part was from about a year ago. One night, our neighbors, the closest people to us about 1/4 mile away, were having a big party that night, and the noise was so loud that even from as far apart as we could still hear them. I am a heavy sleeper, but it was just loud enough to keep me from sleeping. So instead of sleeping, I laid down for about an hour, staring holes from concentration into my ceiling above me. Then at about 11 p.m. they had shut off the music, playing something other than loud rap music and played something a little softer, and I ended up falling asleep at some point. At about 2 a.m., the music once again got loud as it played one last song that sounded like thunder right over us, as it was so loud. So it once again got silent, but I laid there for what felt like hours trying to sleep, but I could not fall asleep. I wondered if maybe I had to pee, which is why usually I can't sleep sometimes. I pushed my pelvis with my finger to try and see if I needed to pee and found I did, so I got up, climbed down from my bunk bed, and walked to the living room. I went to the bathroom in the dark since I knew my house from living in it for 5 years non-stop since our family liked to move around from house to house, but always had this one to go as well. I was leaving the bathroom when I heard a low, inhuman growl that was almost like it was wiped away in the wind even though it was indoors. I froze in fear and looked around, the living room before me. My eyes then landed on a black aura in the far corner, where a feeling of hate and anger filled my head. I can feel auras and spirits, so I was usually used to this, but when the thing's hate filled the room, I got a little scared. The atmosphere thickened like glue and the weight pushed down on every inch of my soul and being. It got closer as the black aura grew, and then the sound of growling and shaggy breathing made me run into my room as fast as I could, even though it was only like 2 or 3 meters away from me. I slammed my wooden bedroom door, jumped into bed, and did my best to create positive energy to keep it out. The third part was just about 4 days ago. I shower usually every other day, and so one night my shower time came, so I brought my Echo into my bathroom and put on my Pandora station and sung to the songs while I was in the shower. I had just put the shampoo into my hair when the song was transferring to the next song and I hear a whistle. It was foggy but very clear. I stopped and peeled back the curtains and yelled to my mom, asking her if she was trying to prank me. No answer. I asked my brother the same thing. No answer. I asked if anyone was there. Still no answer. So I go back into the water and finish my shower quickly. I grabbed my Echo and ran out into my living room and into the kitchen with a reddish towel tied around my chest, which went down to my upper thighs. I asked my mother about it, and she said she did not even go up there because she was making some banana bread for us all to eat, and my brother was asleep upstairs. Then I sat down on the corner of the counter and told my mom all about it. My mom found it odd that my usually 30-minute showers were cut down to less than 7 minutes. Then my dad, who was traveling for work purposes up near New York, called up and was telling us his brother, who was with him, was just telling him about his experience with a ghost in our house a few years ago. Basically, my Uncle Mike had gone to our house while we were in New Orleans and took his friend with him as they were coming down to see my grandmother and Uncle Mike's mother. It was late that night, and Mike's friend had gone up to the restroom. Then, as he was entering the back room, he heard a woman's voice behind him that said, "When are you going to leave?" He froze, turned around and woke Mike, and told him he could not stay, and left my house and will not come back inside till this very day. About 10 years ago, I lived in a pretty active house for 3 years. I was 17 to 19 at the time. It started small but escalated slowly. On the day we moved in, my mom, sister, and I, the neighbors greeted us, a nice older couple. In conversation, they mentioned that the past 3 families had moved out after a year, but I didn't think much of it. As we unpacked, I went into the attic to put away storage boxes and found that the attic was already full of boxes. Full of random things, clothes, toys, and old Atari systems and all kinds of stuff. We thought it was weird but made room for our things and left it all there. The house had a creepy feeling from the start. The being watched feelings and sometimes the feeling that you were somewhere you shouldn't be, especially in the hallway. We had 2 cats and they would be laying down and then look up and seem to watch something cross the room. Sometimes they'd follow it to the next room. Nothing there. No bugs, nothing. Fast forward 6 months and we started hearing footsteps in the attic, heavy boot-sounding steps from one end of the house to the other. Then we would hear boxes sliding across the plywood attic floor as well. This got to be an almost daily occurrence. We knew it wasn't squirrels making the sounds. A while later, my girlfriend at the time had moved in with us, and she had witnessed what we had and more, and it was bad. It started escalating a lot. We would stay up late watching TV. Not every night, but some nights the TV would turn to channel 5 on its own, always between 3 and 3:05 a.m. The cable box would still display whatever channel I was watching, and the remote would stop working. I would have to unplug the cable box and get it to reset. On the back door were long blinds that would clack against the door with the slightest movement. On 2 occasions, my girlfriend and I were watching the bottom corner of the blinds silently be pulled away from the door about a foot and slowly back down. One day, I was going into the garage. I opened the door from the kitchen, and the big trash can we kept just to the left of the door immediately slid about 2 feet to block my way into the garage. That was the first time I had genuinely felt scared of what or who was there. A while after that, it got intense for me specifically. On 8 occasions, I was slapped in the face moments after I laid down in bed. It wasn't the falling feeling you get when you fall asleep. It was complete awake and aware. There was an audible smack, and my head was forced into the pillow. My face would be cold and all pins and needles, and every hair in my body stood up. Every time. Most times I would sense a dense black figure in the bedroom doorway afterwards, and those were the only times I saw apparitions in the house. A little while after the slapping started, my grandparents came to visit. My grandpa is very sensitive to spirits, so I was interested to see what he felt. Within minutes of coming into the house, my grandfather looked to the left, shook off a chill and said, "Whoa, you guys live in this joint?" So that pretty much confirmed it for us, that we weren't crazy. We told him about a little bit of the activity, but not everything, because it would have turned into a week-long rant from my grandfather. Anyway, the next day, I woke up and he was already awake. He immediately led me to the hall closet, where we have always had that feeling that we were somewhere we shouldn't be. He said he got up last night to use the bathroom, and when he had passed the closet, he was stopped and felt he needed to open it. He said he saw a small dark wooden door with a silver metallic handle. As soon as he reached for the door handle, it disappeared and all he saw was drywall. He then opened the closet door and pointed out to me that there was about a 5 by 5 foot completely walled out space behind the closet, and the faint outline of a small door had been drywalled shut. Basically, a small, inaccessible room. We tried to look up the history of the house but couldn't find anything. Shortly after I ended up moving out though. I've had a few other experiences since, but nothing like that house. That house was proof beyond anything that the paranormal exists to me. It got unnerving towards the end, but it hooked me into the paranormal. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these allegedly true haunted house stories, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the swamp, why not subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day in all things natural and supernatural. If you enjoyed my guest today, who read story number 2, Nightmare Files, be sure to check out his channel in the description below. It would really be cool if you went and subscribed to him. I think he has a great channel and I know you'll enjoy his stuff. If you have a story you'd like to share in a future video, be sure to send it in to swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your stories and I'm always looking for them, so be sure to send them in. If you guys want to talk to me outside of YouTube, the best places to do that are Twitter and Instagram. If you have Twitter, follow me there at iSwampDweller, and on Instagram, follow me at SwampDwellerOfficial. I would love to talk to you guys there. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.